Imagine this. You grow up believing that being intelligent is a blessing, that if you study hard, ask the right questions, and think deeply enough, you'll find answers. Clarity, control, peace. You're told that smart people succeed, that understanding the world will make it more manageable. That knowledge leads to happiness, to meaning, to power. But one day something shifts. You start seeing patterns not everyone sees. You recognize the absurdity in social rituals. You notice how people cling to illusions, success, love, status, hoping they'll make the pain go away. And suddenly the world doesn't feel brighter. It feels heavier, colder, like you've opened a door no one else sees, and now you can't close it. Welcome to the hidden curse of awareness. It begins slowly. You overthink everything. You see through people's masks, so much so that you stop trusting faces. You analyze your own emotions till they feel synthetic. And in the silence of your mind, something starts to grow. Not wisdom, but alienation. Because the more you understand the world, the less you feel like you belong in it. That's the paradox no one warns you about. That intelligence, real intelligence, doesn't just make you capable, it makes you vulnerable. It sharpens your perception, but dulls your ability to enjoy life's simpler illusions. It shows you what's real, but strips away what makes it feel worthwhile. You see, most people can live in the moment, laugh freely, love without hesitation, but you're watching everything from a distance, even when you're inside it. You're calculating what the moment means instead of living it, and that disconnection is the cost. Arthur Schopenhauer saw it over 200 years ago. He called intelligence a double-edged sword, capable of cutting through illusion, but also through joy, through peace, through belonging. So before we go any further, ask yourself, has your intelligence made life better or just clearer? And if it's only made things clearer, is that clarity a gift or a trap you can't escape? Stay with me, because in the next chapter, we'll uncover why awareness, for all its brilliance, might be the very thing that keeps you from ever feeling truly at peace again. You've heard it before. Knowledge is power. But what they rarely tell you is this: power doesn't always bring peace. In fact, the more aware you are, the harder it becomes to live in peace. Because awareness comes with a cruel catch. You start seeing too much, too clearly, too deeply. You see through the smiles that hide sadness, the rituals that disguise desperation, the ambition that masks emptiness. You become the kind of person who walks into a room and feels everything. The tension beneath the small talk, the resentment behind the praise, the loneliness echoing under the laughter. And you can't unsee it. That's the paradox. Awareness reveals truth, yes, but truth doesn't always comfort. Often it wounds, it isolates, it takes the innocence out of simple pleasures. That TV show everyone loves? You analyze its symbolism and predict the ending. That romantic moment, you question its authenticity. That party? You wonder what everyone's really trying to distract themselves from. You become a spectator of life, always watching, rarely in it, because when you're aware of life's impermanence, of the absurdity baked into existence, it becomes harder to pretend, to laugh without wondering why, to dance without questioning the music, to love without fearing its inevitable loss. And while others can swim in the shallows, content with surface pleasures, you're drowning in depth. Depth of thought, depth of emotion, depth of existential truth. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this clearly. To him, intelligence didn't elevate us. It exposed us. It stripped away the comforting illusions that keep most people content. And what's left after the illusions are gone? Just the raw ache of awareness. So here's the brutal truth. The brighter your awareness shines, the longer your shadow stretches. And in that shadow lives the question, can peace survive in a mind that sees everything? In the next part, we'll explore that shadow more closely and uncover the psychological cost of seeing too much. There's a price for seeing clearly, and that price is weight, not physical, but emotional, existential. Because the mind that perceives more carries more, more responsibility, more contradiction, more suffering. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a conversation where everyone was laughing, but something in you stayed quiet, distant, because you sensed a tension that no one else noticed? That's the burden of feeling out of place. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're aware. You see layers others miss. You pick up on patterns others dismiss. You ask questions that disrupt comfortable answers. And over time, that awareness becomes isolating. Because how do you connect when you've seen behind the curtain? How do you participate in the performance when you know the lines are scripted? How do you chase the dream when you've seen how hollow the reward can be? The world begins to feel like a masquerade, and the more you understand it, the harder it becomes to pretend. Studies in psychology support this. High cognitive empathy often correlates with higher levels of anxiety, depression, and emotional fatigue. The more sensitive you are to the emotional climate around you, the more overwhelmed you become by it. This isn't just poetic, it's neurological. A more complex brain doesn't just process more data, it reacts more deeply. And while others can compartmentalize, distract, or forget, you remember, you ruminate, you relive. This is why many deep thinkers, philosophers, writers, artists, have battled inner darkness. Not because they were broken, but because they saw too much in a world built on selective blindness. Schopenhauer believed this suffering wasn't random. It was the natural consequence of piercing through illusion. To him, the truly intelligent mind isn't burdened by circumstance. It's burdened by clarity. And that clarity can lead to something even more dangerous than sadness: disconnection. Because once you see through the noise of the world, silence becomes your closest companion. But what if your own mind, your overthinking, your endless analysis, isn't just a byproduct of intelligence, but its curse? Let's explore that next. It starts innocently. You replay a conversation in your head. What did they mean by that? Should I have said something else? Did I sound too cold or too eager? Then you analyze the tone, the timing, the silence between their words. And before you know it, it's 2 a.m. And you're arguing with ghosts. That's the curse of the overthinking mind. A mind so hungry for understanding that it devours itself in the process. You see, most people think intelligence is about answers. But the truth, the most intelligent minds ask questions. Endlessly, relentlessly, painfully. They don't stop at why. They ask, what does this mean? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm right? And that's even worse. Overthinking isn't a flaw, it's an overflow. Too many tabs open, too many versions of reality competing for attention. And the worst part? The smarter you are, the more convincing your inner critic becomes. It doesn't just second guess, it debates, it builds arguments. It makes you feel like you should be able to fix everything, if only you thought hard enough. But not all questions have answers. Not all problems have solutions. And sometimes the attempt to understand is what keeps you stuck. Schopenhauer called this the restless will of the mind. A mind that cannot rest because it believes that somewhere, out there, is a final truth that will make all the noise go quiet. But that truth never comes. Not through logic, not through obsession, not through another sleepless night. Because the mind doesn't want peace. It wants control. And intelligence, left unmanaged, becomes a tool of torment. It turns mirrors into mazes, insight into insomnia. So if you've ever felt like your mind won't shut off, like peace is always one thought away, but that thought never arrives, you're not alone. You're just caught in the trap that no one warned you about. The trap of thinking too much in a world that doesn't think enough. So the question becomes, if intelligence brings so much torment, why do we keep chasing it? Let's find out in the next part. From a young age, we're told a story that intelligence leads to mastery, that if you're smart enough, prepared enough, perceptive enough, you can control your life, predict outcomes, avoid pain, hack the system. But this is a myth, a beautiful, seductive lie. Because the truth is, no amount of intelligence can make life predictable. Think about it. You can plan your career meticulously and still lose your job overnight. You can understand every nuance of psychology and still fall for someone who breaks you. You can read every book, calculate every risk, overanalyze every detail, and still be blindsided by grief, loss, betrayal. Why? Because life is not an equation. It's not a puzzle you can solve with enough variables. It's chaos. It's contradiction. It's uncertainty dressed up as opportunity. And intelligence, the very thing we hope will save us from suffering, often does the opposite. It makes us expect control. And when that control slips, as it always does, we don't just suffer, we break. The over-intellectual mind becomes a prisoner of its own illusion. If I can understand it, I can control it. But understanding is not the same as mastery. Awareness is not immunity. Arthur Schopenhauer knew this intimately. To him, intelligence sharpened perception, but did nothing to soften life. In fact, it made life more brutal, because you saw the train coming and still couldn't stop it. You saw the flaws in the system and still had to live in it. You understood your trauma and still had to carry it. That's the curse, you know better. But that knowledge doesn't always make you feel better. Sometimes it just makes you feel more alone. So here's the paradox. Intelligence gives you clarity, but takes away comfort. It offers insight, but robs you of ignorance. And sometimes ignorance really is bliss. So we arrive at a terrifying truth. Knowing is not the same as living, and the mind that seeks control often loses the very freedom it was trying to find. Schopenhauer saw something most people miss, that beneath our goals, our dreams, our endless pursuits, there's something deeper pulling the strings. He called it the will, not the rational will, not ambition, but a blind, relentless force, a primal hunger to survive, to reproduce, to strive, with no purpose beyond continuation. This will doesn't care about your happiness. It doesn't care about meaning. It simply wants more desire, more chasing, more movement, regardless of direction. Most people are ruled by it without realizing. They wake up wanting something, they achieve it, then they want something else, and again, an endless loop. Desire, satisfaction, boredom, new desire. But here's the difference. The less intelligent person lives with the will. They obey it. They believe the next achievement, the next purchase, the next relationship will make them whole. The intelligent person, they see through it. They notice the cycle. They realize, I got what I wanted, and I still feel empty. They recognize the treadmill, and that realization that the will is endless, irrational, unfulfilling, is devastating. Because once you see the pattern, you can no longer enjoy the game. You can't unknow the futility. You can't fake fulfillment. And so the intelligent mind becomes disillusioned, detached, disconnected. But here's the deeper danger. The more intelligent you are, the more isolated this awareness makes you. How do you relate to people who are still running toward things you no longer believe in? How do you connect in a world where everyone is chasing illusions you've already seen through? This is the loneliness of insight. To know the truth, but be unable to live as if you don't. Schopenhauer didn't hate life. He simply saw it clearly. And what he saw was this. The will is not evil, but it is indifferent. And when you become conscious of that, life feels like a storm with no captain, just winds pushing you toward another craving. So what do you do when you can no longer believe in the chase? Schopenhauer offered an answer, but it wasn't to run faster. It was to step off the treadmill entirely. We romanticize simplicity, a quiet life, a walk in nature, a warm meal shared with someone we love. But for the deeply intelligent, simplicity is not easy. Why? Because the intelligent mind doesn't just experience, it dissects. It doesn't just eat, it questions nutritional value, ethical sourcing, global food systems. It doesn't just walk, it wonders about the meaning of movement, the impact of footsteps, the absurdity of going nowhere. It doesn't just love, it fears the inevitable loss behind every connection. This isn't arrogance, it's a byproduct of complexity. A mind trained to analyze, compare, question, And when that analytical engine never shuts off, even joy becomes a riddle. Schopenhauer recognized this dilemma. He wrote that the more intelligent a person becomes, the more they struggle to enjoy simple pleasures. Not because they don't want to, but because they've seen too much. They see how fleeting it all is. They see the fragility of the moment. And instead of relaxing into it, they mourn it before it's even gone. Imagine watching a sunset, but instead of simply admiring it, you calculate how long until it disappears. Remember a quote about impermanence, and wonder if sunsets meant more to ancient civilizations. That's the tragedy. The moment is here, but you're not. The intelligent mind often lives in commentary, not experience. And so, simplicity remains just out of reach, like a bird you admire, but scare away every time you try to grasp it. But it's not hopeless. Awareness can be trained. Even the sharpest minds can learn to soften. Not by forgetting their intelligence, but by learning when to put it down, to not overanalyze the sunrise, to taste the food without judgment, to love even knowing it won't last. Because maybe the true test of intelligence isn't how much you know, but how gently you can carry that knowing, without letting it crush the moment in your hands. When the mind has seen too much, when the world no longer offers comfort, when intelligence brings only more suffering, where do you go? What do you do? Schopenhauer's answer was simple, but radical. You don't chase more. You quiet the chase. You quiet the will. But what does that mean? To Schopenhauer, the will is that endless voice inside you, craving, demanding, comparing. It says, you'll be happy when you're not enough yet. You need more, faster, better. And we obey it all day, every day. But what if the solution isn't more effort, but less resistance? Not climbing higher, but stepping off the ladder altogether? To quiet the will means to stop identifying with the hunger inside your head, to step back from the storm, to recognize desire as a passing wave, not a command you must obey. It's not about becoming numb. It's about becoming still. Still enough to hear the birds instead of your next goal. Still enough to sit in silence without needing to fill it with productivity. Still enough to let a moment pass without needing to capture it, post it, or understand it. Schopenhauer found glimpses of this silence in art, in music, in philosophy, in quiet observation of nature. Because in those rare moments, you are no longer striving. You are simply aware. You step outside the chase, outside the loop, and for a brief second, you become the observer, not the runner. This, he believed, is where liberation begins. Not in solving life, but in surrendering to it. Not in dominating the mind, but in learning when to put it down. So here's the question. Can you sit quietly with yourself and not chase the next answer? Because in that stillness, you might not find happiness, but you may finally feel free. What if the highest use of intelligence is not to think more, but to suffer less? In a world obsessed with knowledge, speed, and growth, that idea feels almost offensive. But Schopenhauer believed that real wisdom wasn't measured by how much you could understand, but by how much peace you could create within yourself. Because here's what he saw. Intelligence can build empires, but it can't guarantee sleep. It can win arguments, but it can't quiet the heart. It can solve the mysteries of the universe, but still lose itself in the chaos of a single emotion. That's why he saw tranquility not as a side effect of wisdom, but as its ultimate expression. Tranquility is not passive. It's not about giving up. It's not indifference. It's choosing stillness in the middle of storms. It's understanding the world deeply and choosing not to be consumed by it. Tranquility is when you know the madness exists, but refuse to let it define you. It's when you can sit with beauty without needing to dissect it. When you can feel pain without making it your identity. It's when you can allow people to be wrong and not correct them. When you can allow life to be chaotic and not try to fix it. This isn't weakness, it's mastery, because the strongest minds aren't the ones who know everything. They're the ones who know what not to carry anymore. Schopenhauer saw this in the simplest things. A piece of music, a quiet forest path, a small act of kindness. not because they were profound, but because they asked nothing of him. And in a world where everything demands your attention, your reaction, your energy, that kind of simplicity becomes sacred. So maybe, just maybe, the true purpose of intelligence isn't to conquer life, but to learn how to live with it, softly, wisely, and in peace. So where does this leave us? If intelligence can isolate you, drain you, turn beauty into analysis and joy into restlessness, how do you live with it without letting it break you? The answer isn't simple, but it's something deeper than answers. It's a way of being. You stop letting intelligence define your worth. You stop mistaking thoughts for truth. You stop assuming that more knowledge will fill the emptiness inside you. Instead, you start practicing a different kind of intelligence, the intelligence of letting go. Letting go of needing to fix everything, letting go of constant self-analysis, letting go of the idea that life needs to make perfect sense. You begin to ask wiser questions. Is this thought useful? Is this emotion asking for attention or understanding? Can I sit with this discomfort without solving it? You begin to feel again, without immediately translating it into theory. You begin to listen, not just to others, but to the quiet voice inside you that says, you don't need to figure it all out. Schopenhauer didn't tell us to stop thinking. He asked us to think wisely, to think gently, to not let the power of the mind become a prison of our own making. Because in the end, you are not your intelligence. You are not your thoughts. You are not a machine designed to solve the riddle of existence. You are a being capable of depth, but also of stillness, capable of logic, but also of wonder, capable of knowing and of not knowing. So let your mind be brilliant, but let your heart be soft. Let your questions be deep, but let your presence be deeper. Because the truly intelligent life isn't the one that knows everything. It's the one that knows what's worth knowing and what can finally, mercifully, be released.